You've probably topped off your bike and told yourself, oil is oil, it'll do the job. Almost every rider has, but that assumption is exactly how perfectly good engines end up as $4,000 repair bills. In this video, we're breaking down exactly which oil your specific motorcycle actually needs and why that choice is dictated by physics, not preference. Because here's the truth. The wrong oil doesn't fail loudly, it breaks down quietly until your engine turns into a metal-on-metal disaster. Miss this, and you're not risking wear. You're signing up for a $4,000 mistake you won't see coming. There is a truth most riders never fully accept. There is no such thing as good enough oil. Because motorcycle engines do not share a common environment. They operate under entirely different mechanical conditions. A relaxed cruiser, a high-strung sport machine, and a long-range adventure bike are not variations of one system. They are separate worlds, each placing unique demands on the fluid that keeps them alive. Start with engine speed. A typical car rarely pushes beyond moderate revs. Many motorcycles live far higher in the range, climbing into territory where internal motion becomes relentless. At that pace, oil is not simply flowing, it is being forced, stretched, and compressed between metal surfaces thousands of times every minute. This is where shear stability becomes critical, not as a technical term, but as a requirement for survival. If the oil cannot hold its structure under that pressure, it begins to lose strength. And once that happens, the thin protective layer separating moving parts starts to fade. Then comes temperature. Motorcycles generate concentrated heat. Compact design, high output, and constant exposure place enormous thermal strain on the oil. This is where viscosity stability matters, how well the fluid maintains its body when temperatures rise. When that stability is lost, protection weakens at the exact moment the engine depends on it most. If this is the kind of straight, no fluff, mechanical truth you wish someone told you before your first oil change, hit that like button, drop a quick hype in the comments, and subscribe. That's exactly what keeps us committed to breaking down the decisions that actually protect your machine, not the ones that sell products. Now consider precision. Modern engines are built with extremely tight internal spacing. Every moving part relies on a consistent, predictable oil film. There is no room for approximation. The margin for error is measured in thousandths of an inch. And then there is chemistry. Motorcycle oil is formulated with specific additives designed to handle pressure and wear. At the same time, it avoids certain compounds, commonly found in automotive oils, especially those that reduce friction in ways that interfere with wet clutch operation. When the wrong formulation is introduced, the system does not adapt, it reacts. Surfaces that depend on controlled friction begin to slip. Components designed to work together start working against each other. This is why the idea of a universal oil does not hold up. It cannot. In a motorcycle, oil is not just a fluid. It carries load, manages heat, and maintains separation between parts that would otherwise destroy themselves. This is not preference, this is physics. And once you see oil this way, guessing is no longer harmless, it's reckless. But understanding the theory alone doesn't protect your engine. Because once RPM climbs into extreme territory, theory turns into violent reality. And that pressure is exactly what brings us to the next category. The high-revving machines where oil failure isn't gradual, it's immediate and catastrophic. And these are the machines built for one purpose above all else: relentless performance at the very edge of what mechanical systems can endure. Supersports, hypernakeds, motorcycles that are not simply capable of high engine speeds, but are engineered to exist within them. 12,000 revolutions per minute is not a peak, it is a starting point. 14,000 becomes routine. And beyond that, the engine continues to climb, operating in a range where every internal component is pushed into extreme motion. At that level, the behavior of the engine changes in ways most riders never truly consider. Inside, parts are no longer moving in a smooth, predictable rhythm. They are accelerating and reversing direction with violent precision thousands of times each second. The crankshaft spins with such force that it actively resists the presence of oil, trying to throw it outward, away from the exact surfaces that rely on it for survival. Bearings are placed under continuous pressure. Camshafts engage with sharp, repeated contact. Gear teeth collide and separate in rapid succession. And through all of it, one thin layer is expected to maintain order: the oil. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever pushed a high-revving engine hard and felt that heat and stress build up? Or maybe learned the hard way what the wrong oil does at those RPMs? Drop your experience in the comments, because real-world failures and lessons like that don't just help you, they help the next rider avoid a very expensive mistake. What makes this environment especially dangerous is not just the intensity, it is how quickly things begin to fall apart when the oil cannot keep up. There is a point, rarely noticed, where the structure of the oil itself begins to fail. Under sustained high engine speeds, weaker oil loses its internal integrity. The very composition that allows it to maintain thickness starts to break down. It becomes unstable, inconsistent, no longer capable of holding the protective boundary that separates moving metal surfaces. At first, nothing seems different. Then the separation begins to weaken. Friction quietly increases. Temperature rises beyond what the system was designed to manage, and eventually, that invisible barrier disappears altogether. What follows is not dramatic, it is final. Surfaces begin to wear in ways they were never meant to. Precision is lost. Damage becomes embedded into the engine itself long before the rider ever realizes something has changed. And at these engine speeds, that entire sequence unfolds faster than most would believe. This is why high-performance motorcycles demand a very specific kind of oil, not as a suggestion, but as a condition of operation. Full synthetic oil, typically in grades such as 10W40 or 5W40, is designed to remain stable under exactly these conditions. Its structure resists breakdown. It holds its form under sustained stress. Most importantly, it preserves that critical separation between components even when the engine is operating near its absolute limit. Anything less introduces uncertainty. And in this category, uncertainty does not last long. It turns into consequence. Because this is not casual riding. This is continuous mechanical strain at a level that mirrors track conditions, repeated every time the throttle is open with intent. For riders who choose these machines, the experience is immediate, sharp, and deeply engaging. But beneath that sensation lies a simple truth. The entire system depends on something most people treat as routine. And when that foundation is misunderstood, the cost is not gradual, it is irreversible. But extreme speed is only one way an engine can challenge its lubrication. Because while these machines test oil through force and velocity, another type of motorcycle places it under a completely different kind of pressure, one that builds slowly, quietly, and often goes unnoticed until it is already too late. Now we move away from engines that push oil to its limits through speed and into a category that challenges it in a completely different way, through sustained, relentless heat. Air-cooled V-twins, the kind of engines found in classic cruisers, built around torque, simplicity, and long, steady miles. Machines like the Harley-Davidson Softail are not chasing extreme engine speeds. They operate lower in the rev range, delivering power in a slower, more deliberate rhythm. But what they avoid in velocity, they more than make up for in thermal load. These engines routinely run at temperatures exceeding 250 degrees Fahrenheit, especially in stop-and-go traffic, under heavy load, or during hot summer rides. And unlike liquid-cooled systems, there is no radiator actively regulating that heat, no coolant cycling through a controlled loop, only airflow and the oil itself working to carry that heat away. That difference changes everything, because in this environment, oil is not being torn apart by rotational force. It is being weakened by temperature, air-cooled. V-twins are built with wider internal clearances. The spacing between components is greater. Pistons are larger, strokes are longer. Each combustion cycle delivers a slower, heavier mechanical impact, less like a high-speed spin, and more like a steady, repeated force driving through the engine. To handle that, the oil must provide more than lubrication. It must offer resistance, structure, a cushion capable of absorbing that constant mechanical load. But when the oil becomes too thin, that protection begins to disappear. And that is exactly what happens when the wrong grade is used. As temperature rises, lighter oils begin to lose their body. What once held firm between moving surfaces becomes increasingly fluid, less stable, less capable of maintaining pressure within the system. The breakdown does not announce itself. It progresses quietly. First, the oil thins beyond the range the engine was designed to operate within. Then system pressure begins to fall because thinner oil cannot sustain the same internal resistance. From there, critical components, lifters, camshafts, and the entire valve train start losing the protective layer that keeps movement controlled. And what replaces that control is not smooth motion, it is impact. Metal components begin to meet with increasing force, where accelerates, clearances expand further, noise deepens, heat builds again, feeding back into the same cycle. What begins as a subtle loss of protection becomes a compounding problem, one that eventually leaves permanent marks inside the engine. This is why these machines require heavier oil, most commonly in a 20W50 grade. Not as a recommendation, but as a condition for proper operation. That thicker oil maintains its structure under high temperature. It preserves pressure. It absorbs the mechanical shock created by large, slow-moving components. Most importantly, it sustains the barrier that prevents direct contact where it matters most. And this is where many riders make a costly assumption. They believe newer, lighter oil must be an upgrade. That thinner automatically means more efficient, more advanced, more protective. But in an air-cooled V-twin, thinner oil does not improve the system. It undermines it. Because these engines were never designed around minimal resistance. They were built around strength. By now, two very different patterns are beginning to emerge. One environment pushes oil to failure through speed. The other breaks it down through heat. But most motorcycles do not live at either extreme. And that middle ground introduces a different kind of risk entirely. One that many riders overlook until it is already affecting how the bike feels beneath them. Now let's pause here, because this is where a lot of riders get it completely wrong. If you're running a cruiser or an air-cooled V-twin, and you've ever noticed the engine getting hotter than expected, rougher at idle, or just feeling off under load, what oil were you running at that time? Drop your experience in the comments, because in machines like this, oil isn't just lubrication. It's the only thing standing between controlled heat and mechanical failure. And your answer might save someone else from making the same costly mistake. Many riders arrive at this category and assume they have reached the safe ground. These motorcycles are not extreme, not fragile, not intimidating, middleweight, naked bikes, adventure machines, everyday commuters. They start easily, handle predictably, and seem to tolerate almost anything. They feel reliable, and that quiet confidence is exactly what leads to expensive mistakes, because beneath that versatility sits a system that is far more demanding than it appears. In these machines, the oil is shared across multiple systems. It does not serve a single purpose. It moves through the engine, the transmission, and the clutch. Three environments with completely different mechanical demands. The engine produces heat and pressure. The gearbox subjects the oil to constant mechanical stress. And the clutch depends on friction, not reduced, but controlled. That last detail changes everything. These motorcycles use a wet clutch, where friction plates operate fully submerged in engine oil. Every launch, every shift, every pull on the throttle depends on how that oil behaves between those plates. Too little friction and the clutch slips. Too much resistance and engagement becomes rough. There's no margin for imbalance. And this is where a common shortcut turns into guaranteed damage. Using automotive oil. At a glance, it seems acceptable. The same 10W40 rating, sometimes even marketed as high performance. But that similarity hides a critical difference. Most automotive oils, especially those labeled energy conserving, contain friction modifiers. These additives are designed to reduce drag inside car engines. Inside a motorcycle, they do the opposite of what's needed. They coat the clutch plates, reducing the friction required to transfer power. The result is immediate and unavoidable. You open the throttle, the engine revs climb, but the motorcycle does not accelerate as it should. The clutch begins to slip, generating heat that rapidly damages the friction material. Within a few hundred miles, often less than 500, the clutch is compromised. And once that surface is damaged, it does not recover. No oil change can reverse it. Repair means disassembly, replacement, and unnecessary cost. This is not a rare failure. It is mechanical cause and effect. So what does this system actually require? For most modern all-rounders and adventure motorcycles, the correct choice is a semi-synthetic 10W40 oil with JASO MA2 certification. That standard ensures the oil provides the precise friction balance required for wet clutch operation. It also confirms resistance to shear forces inside the gearbox and stability under heat. In other words, it is built for a system where one fluid must perform multiple roles without compromise. Get it right, and the motorcycle runs smoothly for thousands of miles. Get it wrong, and wear begins immediately, even if you cannot feel it yet. And by the time symptoms appear, the damage is already done. So the rule here is absolute. If your motorcycle uses a wet clutch, automotive oil is not an alternative. It is a direct path to failure. By now, the pattern is clear: match the oil to the machine. But there is one category where even that rule becomes dangerously misleading. And there is a point where modern stops meaning better. And that point begins the moment you step into the world of vintage and pre-1990 motorcycle engines. These machines were built in a completely different era of engineering. Different materials, different tolerances, different assumptions about how protection actually works inside the engine. And when modern oil chemistry enters that environment, something subtle but destructive begins to happen. Because many of these older engines rely on a design that no longer exists in most modern motorcycles: the flat tappet camshaft. Unlike today's roller systems, where components glide with minimal resistance, flat tappet designs operate under direct sliding contact. metal surfaces pressing against each other repeatedly, thousands of times per minute, with no rolling buffer in between. That creates enormous pressure concentrated in extremely small areas. And without the right protection, those surfaces don't last. To survive that stress, these engines were built around a very specific chemical safeguard, ZDDP, zinc dialkyl dithiaphosphate. This is not just another additive mixed into oil for marketing claims. It is a sacrificial layer. Under heat and pressure, IT reacts with metal surfaces and forms a protective barrier. Instead of metal grinding directly against metal, that layer absorbs the damage. It wears, so the engine does not. That relationship was never optional. It was engineered into the system from the beginning. Now here is where the problem begins. Most modern oils contain significantly reduced levels of ZDDP, not because it failed, but because modern vehicles no longer depend on it in the same way. Emissions systems, particularly catalytic converters, are sensitive to high zinc content. Over time, regulations pushed manufacturers to reduce those levels, which means today's oils are designed for modern engines, not for the demands of older ones. So when a low ZDDP oil is introduced into a vintage engine, the protection that engine was built around is quietly removed, and the failure does not announce itself. There is no sudden noise, no immediate warning, no dramatic moment that signals something has gone wrong. Instead, the process begins silently. Microscopic contact at the cam lobes, gradual wear across critical surfaces, a slow erosion of the precise shapes that control valve timing. As that wear progresses, performance begins to fade. Valve operation becomes less accurate. Fine metal particles circulate through the system, accelerating damage in places the rider cannot see. And by the time symptoms become noticeable, the core components are already compromised. There is no simple fix waiting at that point, only repair. There is another factor most riders overlook: sealing. Older engines were built with gasket materials and tolerances that behave very differently from modern designs. Advanced synthetic oils, with their improved flow characteristics, can move more easily through those older systems, finding paths past seals that were never designed to contain them. The result is slow, persistent leakage, where none existed before. This is why these engines require high zinc mineral oil. Not because it is outdated, but because it aligns with the mechanical reality they were built for. It provides the necessary ZDDP protection. It behaves in a way older seals can manage. It supports the system as it was originally engineered, not as we wish it to be today. And this leads to a contradiction many riders never expect. In vintage engines, modern oil is not an upgrade. It is a liability. By now, the pattern is no longer about categories of motorcycles. It is about the rules that govern how metal survives under pressure. And once those rules become clear, every oil recommendation stops feeling arbitrary. Because there is a deeper logic behind all of it. One that decides whether an engine lasts for decades or slowly wears itself out without ever making a sound. At this point, the machines may look completely different, but the rules governing them do not change. Because beneath every failure we've explored, whether it's a high-revving performance engine, a heat-saturated V-twin, or a clutch-dependent all-rounder, there are a few underlying principles that quietly determine the outcome. Every time the engine runs, they are not preferences, they are not recommendations, they are conditions. The first is shear stability. Inside any engine, oil is constantly being forced through narrow spaces, pulled between moving parts, and compressed under load. Gear teeth mesh. Crankshafts rotate at speed. Surfaces slide against each other with force. Under those conditions, the oil must hold its internal structure together. If it cannot, it begins to lose its integrity, not visibly, but functionally. As that structure weakens, the oil no longer maintains the same thickness. It becomes less capable of holding a consistent layer between components. That invisible boundary, thin as it may be, is the only thing preventing direct contact. Once that boundary weakens, separation begins to disappear. And without separation, there is only friction. The second principle is viscosity behavior across temperature. Every engine experiences a wide range of conditions, from cold, starts in the morning, to full operating temperature after sustained riding. The oil must adapt to both extremes without losing its effectiveness. When it is too thick in cold conditions, it struggles to circulate quickly. Critical components remain unprotected in those first moments after startup. When it becomes too thin under heat, it loses the strength required to stay in place under pressure. In either case, the result is the same. Protection is compromised, not because the oil is absent, but because it is no longer behaving as required. The third factor emerges in motorcycles that use a shared oil system for both engine and clutch. This is where standards like JASO ME 2 become essential. Within these systems, the oil is responsible for more than lubrication. It must also provide a very specific level of friction. Too little, and the clutch begins to slip under load. Too much, and engagement becomes harsh and unpredictable. Automotive oils often include friction modifiers designed to reduce resistance. In a motorcycle, those same additives disrupt the balance entirely. The clutch loses its ability to hold. Heat builds rapidly, wear accelerates, and what begins as a subtle change in feel becomes a complete loss of function. Finally, there is the role of anti-wear protection, particularly in older or high-load engine designs. Certain components operate under extreme pressure where the oil film alone is not always enough. Additives such as ZDDP create a protective layer that sacrifices itself to prevent direct surface damage. Without that layer, wear does not wait. It begins immediately, gradually altering the shape and function of critical parts. And once those surfaces change, the engine does not recover. All of these principles point to a single, unifying reality. Oil is not simply present to reduce friction. Its purpose is to maintain a stable, reliable barrier between moving metal surfaces under constantly changing conditions. Every requirement, whether it is resistance to shear, stability under heat, controlled friction, or additive protection, exists to preserve that barrier. If any one of those elements fails, the system begins to break down. And when that barrier collapses, damage does not develop over time. It begins the moment the separation is lost. This is why choosing the correct oil is not about preference, brand, or convenience. It is about alignment with the mechanical demands of the engine itself, because the engine does not adapt to the oil. The oil must meet the engine, and when it does not, the outcome is not uncertain, ET is inevitable. Yet, even with these principles clearly defined, most failures do not begin with a lack of knowledge. They begin with small, everyday decisions that seem harmless in the moment. And that disconnect between knowledge and habit is exactly what leads us to the next reality. The common mistakes that quietly destroy engines long before the rider ever sees it coming. And that is exactly where we arrive at the part most riders avoid. Engines do not fail by chance. They fail through decisions. And the dangerous part is how reasonable those decisions feel in the moment. The first mistake is using automotive oil. On the surface, it makes sense. The viscosity matches. The label says full synthetic. It is easy to find and usually costs less. But motorcycles are not built like cars. They rely on a shared system where the same oil serves the engine, gearbox, and clutch. Automotive oil introduces friction modifiers that interfere with that balance. Instead of supporting the system, it disrupts it. The result is subtle at first. Under load, the clutch begins to slip. Gear surfaces lose the protection they depend on, where accelerates quietly. The second mistake is trusting energy-conserving labels. That phrase sounds like an advantage: less friction, better efficiency, smoother operation. But inside a wet clutch, friction is not a problem to eliminate. It is a requirement. Reduce it, and the clutch loses its ability to transfer power. What appears to be an upgrade becomes a hidden weakness. The third mistake is choosing based on price. This is where small savings create large consequences. It is easy to believe one bottle is close enough to another. That spending less changes nothing important. But oil is not just a fluid you pour in. It is the barrier that absorbs load, manages heat, and keeps metal surfaces from touching under extreme pressure. Lower quality or incorrect oil loses that ability faster. It thins, weakens, and stops protecting when the engine is working hardest. And when that protection fades, the cost returns in a far more expensive form. The fourth mistake is ignoring what the engine actually requires. This is the most common failure point. Riders assume their machine is not that different, that recommendations are flexible, that small deviations will not matter. But every engine is built around specific conditions: speed, temperature, internal spacing, and clutch design. The oil specification is not a suggestion. It is a direct response to those demands. Ignore it, and the system loses the protection it was designed to rely on. Here's the hard truth. None of these choices feel careless. They feel practical until the effects begin to surface. By the time slipping appears or performance changes, the process is already in motion. Wear has begun. Protection has already broken down. These are not minor risks. They are predictable outcomes. And once they arrive, there is no adjustment, only repair, which leads to the final step, where the difference between damage and longevity becomes unmistakably clear. But before we step into the final takeaway, do you like this kind of breakdown? Tap that like button. And if you want to support the channel even more and get early access to the next deep dives, consider becoming a member. In the end, it all comes down to one decision. Not how you ride, not the badge on the tank, not even how often you change your oil. Just what you pour into the engine. Because by now, the pattern is clear. Oil is not a background fluid. It is the engine's primary defense. It carries load, controls heat, and keeps metal surfaces from destroying each other in seconds. And it either does that job or it doesn't. There is no middle ground. When the correct oil is used, everything stays stable. Wear is controlled. The engine performs as it was designed to, mile after mile. But when the wrong oil goes in, failure begins quietly. The protective film weakens, additives fall short, heat builds where it shouldn't, and damage starts, layer by layer. By the time you feel it, it's already too late. That small decision becomes a costly one. So the rule is simple. Match the oil to the engine? Exactly. Because engines don't guess, they respond. If this video made you rethink what you pour into your engine or saved you from a mistake that could have cost you thousands, don't stop here. There's a next step every rider needs to understand before they touch their bike again. Click the next video and keep the chain of good decisions going. Join the tribe by subscribing, because this channel exists for riders who take their machines seriously. And if you want to go even deeper and get early access to what's coming next, become a member. And if this helped you, even once, hit that like button so more riders don't learn this lesson the expensive way.